Good morning, listeners. You're welcome to this week's Ag Report. I'm Jim Finn. My guests this week are Ger Hartnett from the Health and Safety Authority, Pat O'Toole from the Irish Farmers Journal, Finola McCoy from Animal Health Ireland and particularly from CellCheck. My first guest this morning is Donal Malan, the Teagasc manager for Tipperary, and hopefully Donal is going to look back at the year that was 2025. Good morning, Donal, and thanks very much for joining us.
Morning, Jim. How are you?
That's good to have you.
Good morning to all your listeners.
Yeah, good to have you back at this particular time of the year. Donal, I said there at the beginning that you'll probably look back at the farming year that was 2025. So what would your main takeaway be?
So I suppose, Jim, when you look at farming, whether you're going backwards or going forwards, you have to take into account that at all times, farmers have to deal with a lot of issues. Things like, things that change. Like we say, if you take this year now, in nearly every year there's some sort of an animal health shock, and I suppose blue tongue is on the horizon there, people are afraid. And then I suppose things like structural changes, costs have increased significantly there since COVID and the wars and so forth like that, and they've stayed high.
Right.
So that's the issue, the same thing. And commodity markets are things that farmers are dealing with at all times. And then you have things like, I suppose, like the environment, the greenhouse gases, and indeed water. And I suppose finally they have to keep the eye on the ball at all times on production efficiency. So they're kind of the large things, I suppose, kind of in front of farmers at all times that they have to deal with. But looking back on last year, then I suppose maybe first of all on the farm side, I suppose it was a very good year overall. The results are in there from our rural economists who do the National Farm Survey, and on average the incomes increased for 2025 by 33%. But before anyone gets carried away, the forecast to go down 19% in 2026. And I think everybody involved in farming recognises that 2025 was an outstanding year, really, on most of the enterprises, I suppose, with the exception of tillage. And I suppose it's very good on the dairy side, very good on the. I don't think I have, or probably you have, Jim, ever experienced the sort of prices that cattle have been making in 2025. And I suppose that's been mainly driven by a kind of a scarcity, cutbacks, I suppose, in UK and Europe and so forth. And thankfully, it is forecast that those prices will remain strong for 2026. So there shouldn't be too much difference on the cattle side of 2026. Costs are not changing a whole pile. Fertilizer is going to be up a bit, feed will be down a bit. And that applies to on the dairy side, of course, as well. I suppose the big one then is on the dairy side. There's a kind of big fall back of the markets there. We've kind of gone into a global surplus, I suppose, if you like, in terms of milk production. And that is, we had the dairy conference there last week, so straight away we see the significant falls in milk price, and that's just feeding into a fairly big drop on profits on the milk side, on the dairy side next year. But by and large, farmers are, have braced themselves for it. They realise there's good years and bad years, and certainly now it's going to be a testing enough year on the dairy side, I'd say, for the year ahead.
Right. Would you be worried for any dairy farmers that would be deep in debt going into 2026?
Well, I'd say, Jim, like the fact that 2025 was a good year, people are kind of, most people would have kind of put a bit aside because these cycles are ongoing, the kind of commodity markets. You're going to have a good year, you're going to have a bad year, you're going to have 2 good years, and everyone, hopefully the down cycles are stay smaller than the up cycles. So anybody with a bit of sense will make sure that in the good year, that you're kind of putting a bit of padding there to deal with the bad year. And I think the majority of people have taken that approach. Most dairy farmers I talk to, they're fairly sensible about the thing. They realise that there has been a couple of good years, and they realise, there's a cycle there, and the good years will come again.
Okay, and yeah, go on.
I was just going to say on So the cattle side,
Yeah.
I suppose, it was probably long overdue that the price of cattle came up, and unfortunately the costs have gone up. I suppose with everything the last couple of years. So it is good to see the prices have come up. Certainly for the next year or two, anyway, they seem to have reached a new level, and it's not forecast for them to be dropping back. I suppose one of the things that are just both dairy dry stock farms are going to have to deal with, and including sheep as well, maybe in the hand tillage, is the increase in price of fertilizers does appear to be going to happen. There's a thing called CBAM, which is to do with carbon, and it's putting a levy on fertilizer that's driving it up, and it's forecast for feed prices to drop down a bit, and also oil prices to come back a bit as well. So on the cost side, that's an awful lot of change, because one is up and the other two are down, and that's largely. So the big movers really are the milk price, I suppose, is the big mover. And the tillage hasn't been great during tillage, not forecast to be any better next year. That's what to say. What the forecast is saying. Sheep are good, and will continue to be good.
Okay, so they're the commodities. Would you be worried for the tillage man, because we need to produce grain in this country?
Yeah, they've been having a tough enough old time, in fairness, and certainly there's no great change forecast in the coming year, anyway, and as well as that, they're competing for land as well, with other enterprises maybe going to be stronger. So it's a tough enough game at the moment in the tillage side. There's no doubt about that. Looking back in terms of our own activities, and I suppose we had a really busy year. We're very pleased with it, and I suppose we had a good few events, and they were really, really well attended. I think you were at a number of them yourself. And I suppose one thing we're fairly proud of as well in the county this year is we had 3 national award winners, top class farmers winning coming first in the country. We had the Walshes there, who won the sustainability awards early in the year. Fantastic farm work there. Aidan Kennedy won the milk quality awards. Another phenomenal day out we had there. And to top it off now, the Ryans of Lachine have won the NDC Milk Quality Awards, for the national awards for the current year, supplying Centenary Thomas. So from that point of view, it was a great old year, and a lot happening, busy year.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
Yeah, and you had some great events, not talking just about the big ones like the National Dairy Conference being in Clonmel a couple of weeks ago, but you had ones around the county that were just run by your own personnel, and they were fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah. And then I suppose just one other one comes to mind there, Jim, as well, was the Transferring the Family Farm. We're trying to help farmers, I suppose, to prepare for generational renewal. It's a hot topic at the moment. Farmers are not getting any younger.
No. Even the young ones aren't getting younger, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And every year adds a little bit onto it. And an awful lot of farmers are looking at how they kind of make the transition to the next. So the Transferring the Family Farm, we with solicitors and accountants and our own people involved there, giving kind of one-to-one. So look, we were overbooked for it. We'll probably run another one again in the year ahead. And so and just to mention one that's coming up there now, I suppose, as well as we're talking about events, Jim. We're nice. The calf now has become so important. It's always important. Really become important now. Very important for the dairyman now, if nothing else, as well, because they're making fantastic money. The calf is going to produce your beef down the road. So we've had to call a calf care event, which we run in conjunction with AHI and Health Ireland, and we're hosting that. We're running that on the 19th of December, Jim, on the Breen family farm, Simon and Peter Breen out in Emily, Gortine and Emily, and I'll even give you the postcode there. That's at 11 o'clock, and their postcode is E34FW93. And I suppose the thing, if you're looking at a calf care event, you're looking at kind of feeding and the sheds and the ventilation, and get the colostrum and all those sorts of stuff, management and that's all are welcome to that. Men and women, all are welcome. Yeah.
Okay, you're dead right there. The price of calves are through the roof at the moment. There's only a few years ago we were giving them away. So it just
Yeah.
shows you what change can do and how quickly it can come upon you. What about things in Clonmel and the office, Donald?
Oh yes, as you're probably aware, Jim, or a lot of our clients would be aware, we shut down the office there in Clonmel a few months ago. We've a fabulous job done it now. It's almost complete, and we're hoping to move back in there next week, and we'll have it up and running fully from the 4th of January onwards. So farmers will be welcome to come in from that date on, not this side of Christmas. It's only a couple of weeks away now, you know. So yeah, it's a super job, Jim, and after these have done, and so we moved out altogether for a few months, left the contractors at us, and full credit to them. They're doing a great job. We're looking forward to going back in there.
Okay, well, look at we're running out of time, but I would like to thank you for all the people that you have given me during the past year to talk about the various things in farming, and to wish you and your family and your immediate family as well as your Teagasc family a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
You're very welcome, Jim. I suppose one thing I didn't mention there, we have a new Green Set course starting on the 1st of January there now. That's full at the moment, but if people are interested, just maybe contact John Barton there in Thurles. But likewise, I want to wish you, Jim, and your family and all your listeners a very happy Christmas from all in Teagasc.
Okay, well, look at Donald, thanks very much. That listeners was Donald Milan, who is the Teagasc manager for County Tipperary. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Ger Hartnett from the Health and Safety Authority, and you may or you may not be aware that they issued a notice last Monday with regards to farm safety, and it's more about the farmer's safety, if I'm correct, and Ger is going to tell me all about it. Good morning, Ger, and thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Jim, to you and your listeners, and thanks for having me on your show.
It's good to have you back, Ger. You've been on it before. This campaign that you have looking after farmers' health, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Jim, so we're in the middle of a week-long inspection campaign today. The aim of this inspection campaign is to improve farmers' health and well-being, which is a critical factor in reducing serious injuries and fatalities on farms.
Okay, and what then are you looking at, when you're talking about the health of the farmer?
So basically, our HSA inspectors will call to the farm, meet with the farmer, and I try and identify the farm hazards and discuss the related health risks during the campaign. So often we focus on the livestock safety, the falls from heights, and the working around machinery, but the focus this time will be around the other factors which impact farmers' health, such as manual handling, handling of chemicals, when dosing cattle, liming pens, handling hay and dust and spores, and prevention of infection, likes of knives, and then personal health and well-being piece as well. So we'll look at the tasks that the farmer is doing and provide some advice and guidance on how to protect their own health and well-being as part of the inspection campaign.
And I'm looking at the list that came out on your email that announced this particular inspections that you're doing at the moment. And I'm looking at things like heart disease, stroke, overweight, back pain, stress, mental health, lung issues, hearing loss. I suppose you mentioned that there when you said about noise, and skin problems. Do farmers suffer from these more than the rest of the population?
Yes, so from the research that we have, so for example on stress, Teagasc research suggests that 57% of farmers experience stress over a 5-year period, with 13% of farmers reporting being stressed all or most of the time. So we know that workload and finances and weather issues are all key stress factors, so that's one element. But I suppose on the physical side of things, then farmers are out in all types of weather. So they've 3 times the risk of skin cancer. 7 times the risk of the normal population in heart and vascular diseases. And much of this is to do with lifestyle and not looking after themselves. So farmers are great at looking after their farm and their animals, but not necessarily looking after themselves. So there is, accumulation of risk factors for heart disease, which is being overweight and obesity. Respiratory diseases as well are common. You've got farmers' lung, handling dust and spores from hay, etc. And then musculoskeletal disorders, because it's a very manual task, within farming. More than half of Irish farmers suffer a back injury annually from the information that we have. And then obviously you have noise and vibration as well, the likes of operating tractors and machinery, chainsaws. Animals even themselves can produce excessive noise inside in the parlour when you're milking. So noise is a big issue as well. And obviously then you have the fatigue element. So, obviously we're coming into maybe spring calving season after Christmas into January and February, and you'll have disrupted sleep, you'll have long hours, you're out in the dark. And then obviously in the summer periods when you're harvesting, whether it's the hay, silage, whatever the case is, long hours of working as well, taking advantage of the longer days. So fatigue and burnout is a big factor as well in farmers' physical and mental health.
Now, of course, farmers would say to themselves, because of the nature of the work, that at least it's very, very physical, and that they would be keeping their heart very healthy. The stats don't reflect that, sure they don't. The stats are going in the opposite direction.
Correct, and I suppose it is a physical job. It's a manual job in farming, but farmers don't necessarily get exercise outside of the farm environment, and obviously that's a key factor in maintaining good health. And I suppose the purpose of the campaign is really to encourage farmers to consider the health risks associated with their work. And as we know, early detection of health issues leads to better outcomes. So if farmers notice any changes in their health, they should seek advice from a healthcare professional without delay. And the reason we're focusing on this issue is that poor health and well-being can significantly increase the risk of serious or even fatal injuries. So prioritising farmers' personal health is absolutely essential.
And then what kind of questions then, or what kind of fact-finding mission are your inspectors on when they, say they come to visit me, for instance, Ger? What kind of questions are they going to ask me?
Well, if we look at the basic things, Jim, around the farmyard, so, mechanical aids, for example, so, how do you prevent a back injury? Do you use a piece of work equipment for lifting something? Mm-hmm. Are you using a front loader of a tractor or a telehandler to lift big fertilizer bags? Does the farmer use hearing protection for working with noisy machinery or in noisy settings? Does the farmer have a mask when working with mouldy or dusty materials, hay, straw inside in the sheds? Is direct contact with chemicals avoided, for example? If you're liming pins, have you got goggles and gloves and a mask? And, the summertime, simple as do you wear a hat and put on sunblock? And then, obviously, the fatigue piece and questions around any signs of stress and providing some guidance on how to deal with that. And the key thing then is that there is a risk assessment piece in the Farm Safety Code of Practice around health of farmers, and that farmers would take a look at that as well as identifying the hazards associated with machinery, livestock, working at height, and the other tasks on the farm. So they're the general questions. It won't dig too deep into health and well-being, but it's just looking at the key hazards and then providing the guidance and advice. So we have a range of publications there that we would hand out to the farmer and advise them on as well. Like, what we do know is that older farmers are disproportionately affected by farm accidents. So we have a publication around farming in older age, health in focus and safety in action. So we'd pass that information on as well. And there's other publications such as Farmers' Health and Wellbeing, which is produced by the Farm Safety Partnership and the Health and Safety Authority, which is a guide to staying healthy while farming. And then there is a guide on reducing the back injuries on farms as well. So those kind of publications will be given to the farmer as well, so they can, in their own time, review the information contained within that and look at the hazards they have faced in their own workplace.
All very good and all very sensible pamphlets we're giving out to farmers, Ger. Ger, I suppose we're coming to the end of another year. Seems to have been a better year than some of the years gone past as far as farm fatalities are concerned.
Unfortunately, Jim, it hasn't. Last year we had 12 farm fatalities in total. This year we're currently at 18 confirmed fatal accidents on farms. So we've actually seen a surge in farm accidents and fatal incidents as well. And again, it goes back to the three main causations, which are falls from height, so falling off a roof, quite a common one, when repairing, making parlour roof or a shed after storm damage. Handling livestock always presents risks as well, and working around machinery, tractors and quad bikes in particular this year again has resulted in a number of fatalities. So there is, control measures around all of those aspects of work. So I would just encourage our listeners, at this time of year in particular, we're going to have storms, not to go up on the roof on their own. Get a contractor, get help, use the proper work equipment, such as a mobile elevated work platform, and do not take risks when working at height, because it is a significant cause of farm fatalities in around the winter period because of the issues with storms and subsequent damage. And indeed into the new year, looking at the spring, handling of livestock and calving season as well, there is obviously equipment there that can be used, calving gates and segregation of the farmer from the animal. I think that's well known. And then into, I suppose, the spring and the summer period, the main risks there are around tractors, machinery and vehicles. So like the use of quad bikes, farmers need to be trained. Okay, it's not like operating a tractor. It's a different piece of work equipment. They should be wearing a helmet, and they should be trained on that piece of work equipment as well. So they're the three areas of concern for the Health and Safety Authority, and there's any amount of guidance and advice on the HSA website, and we'd always urge people to revert to their risk assessment, the farmers, and have a look at the review it on an annual basis, look at what causes harm on their farm, and make sure that the proper control measures are in place.
Okay, it's disappointing to hear that the numbers have gone up. And given all the good work that you and your team do to try to bring down fatalities and serious accidents on a farm. But let's hope that 2026 will be a better year. Thanks very much, Ger. That, listeners, was Ger Hartnett from the Health and Safety Authority. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Pat O'Toole from the Irish Farmers Journal, and we're going to cover two topics. One is the derogation news that we got during the week and maybe the implications thereof for Irish farmers. But also we're going to be looking at gene editing, which might be some very good news for the beleaguered tillage farmer here in Ireland. Good morning, Pat, and thanks for joining us.
Morning, Jim.
Good to have you back, Pat. Let's start off with the derogation. I suppose we got the news we expected we were going to get, but are the add-on conditions, are they going to be difficult for Irish farmers?
I think that if you'd offered farmers this deal 12 months ago, they would have bitten your hand off for it. Mm-hmm. Let's put it that way, that I think they'd be delighted that the derogation is there and that the conditionality is within reach. The biggest one by far, I think, is the extra slurry storage. So from 2028 on, there has to be an increase of 20% in the slurry storage capacity on derogation farms. That's going to require a lot of investment, especially on bigger farms. I know they have more resources, but 20%, it's a high number. The other ones in relation to on-farm activity, I think are reachable. So you're talking about further setback buffer zones from water courses. I think it's 4 metres normally, but it's 7 metres where there's an incline of more than 20%. You have the issues for the Barrow and Slaney catchments. So the southeast, basically, that would be really parts of Kildare, Carlow, a small part of Wicklow, Wexford and Kilkenny. So the use of sludge is going to be prohibited in the autumn in those counties. That's going to have a knock-on effect for Ringsend. and not wanting to get away from the main point, but like the Irish Water are hugely dependent on Irish farmers and particularly tillage farmers to take their waste and their sludge away and use it on land and land spread it. So that's a knock-on effect. Irish Water may actually be less happy with this than most Irish farmers. And I suppose the big one then is the appropriate assessment, and that's on the government. So we have the catchments now, almost 600 catchments around the country, or sub-catchments, and there's going to be an appropriate assessment done for each one of those. And that's an onerous task. We don't really know exactly how that's going to be done. It's going to be a huge commitment of government resources. It's going to be a big strain on the expert capacity that's out there to carry out these assessments. So I think there's going to be quite a stretch of resources there of people who have the capacity to carry out these appropriate assessments. And that's in every part of the country, because those 583 catchments comprise the entire country between them. So it's a huge task. And of course, the parallel issue that the nitrates derogation was announced earlier this week, but on Thursday morning, even as the Farmers Journal was coming out with the news that the derogation has been renewed and the issues or the conditionality attached, we have An Taisce prosecuting the Irish government through the European Court of Justice in relation to the current 5th Nitrates Action Plan and the derogation associated with it, the one we're currently operating under. That court case took place initially exactly 2 years ago in the High Court, and An Taisce were unsuccessful. They are now appealing it to the European Court of Justice, and the implications for the new derogation, the new Nitrates Action Programme, which has also been approved, would be significant. So we have to wait and watch that as it unfolds.
Okay, can I bring you back to the slurry storage? Given that I suppose, most derogation farmers, or the most of them anyway, bulk of them, are dairy farmers, and the price of milk is dropping at a horrific rate at the moment. I see Lakeland's dropped by 4 cents yesterday. So, and I'm quite sure the rest are going to follow. It might be very difficult for farmers to be able to build in this extra slurry, given the cost with milk virtually now below the cost of production, according to Teagasc.
Yeah, and I don't know as yet whether such work will be TAM supported, because if it's, I know where it's mandatory under environmental law, it's not possible to get it TAM supported. This is optional, but it is to comply with. It's a mandatory action for a derogation farm. So we'll have to wait and see where that pans out. But yes, huge commitment. I think that the reality is that dairying has had a really good year. It had a really good year in 2022. It had a really difficult year in 2023 and a decent year last year. So the 4-year cycle has been okay, and this year has been exceptional. And I think that the expectation is that dairy farmers would manage their business in a way that they'll ride out the tougher years, with the surplus that's being gained in the really good years. And in that regard, dairying is now, with the increased volatility in milk price, dairying is more like tillage farming or poultry farming or pig farming, which has always dealt with significant volatility. But the capital spending that is required on dairy farming now is onerous. I would think that some farmers will say, you know what, don't need it. And there may be a happy medium or a sweet spot for each farm where maybe you will avail of the derogation but ratchet back from 220 to 195, and that would only require a 10% increase in slurry capacity, or maybe even less, depending on the numbers on that farm. What is probably the other aspect that is going to be significant for a lot of farms is the limitations on the stocking rates on grazing platform and the requirement to move slurry off the grazing platform to out farms, land that's either being grazed by young stock or more particularly silage platforms. So I think that's going to require very careful management from farmers, and I don't think there's going to be much wiggle room there. I think any derogation farmer who thinks that they're going to, play fast and loose with those regulations will get a rude awakening. The derogation is policed extremely closely. We have 7,000 farmers in derogation. 10% of them are annually visited, but that's on top of a regime of compliance where farmers are required to send in nutrient management plans, all their fertilizer purchases and sales, a very high degree of oversight. And of course, then there will be satellite inspections separate to the 700 or so on-farm inspections on an annual basis. So if a farmer's been in the derogation for 10 years, they've had at least one very intensive on-farm visit. And we've got to remember there are 1,000, so the 7,000 derogation farmers, 1,000 of those are not dairying, and they are more than likely cattle finishers.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, you would have to have concerns around them because we have super prices for cattle at the moment for finished cattle. It has to be remembered, Jim, that of the 7,000 derogation farms, about 1,000 are cattle farms and non-dairying, and they account for the bulk of our intensive finishing farms. And while cattle are making really good prices in the factories and still are, and there's no expectation that will change immediately, but the cost of filling those sheds this autumn has been astronomical, more than double what it would have been 3 years ago. So those farmers are quite vulnerable to any sudden price change. They have almost no cost control because they're competing with each other around the ring every week and with the exporters. So they are quite vulnerable as well, and their capacity to build extra slurry storage would have to be questioned.
There's plenty in this new derogation regulations that are coming down, and farmers are really going to have to work it out and be very, very careful with how they are implemented on each and every single farm. That's the message you're giving out this morning, Pat.
Yeah, and that would always be the message with the derogation. The consequences for non-compliance of any derogation requirement are significant. You're out for the year and you're out for the following year. So farmers would suddenly go from 215, 220 down to 170. And would have to, arrange either a reduction, an immediate and fairly drastic reduction in livestock numbers, or the exportation of a significant amount of slurry from the farm with that loss of nutrient. So, yeah, I think we've seen a very high level of compliance with the derogation. I think that farmers who enter it don't enter it lightly. And there is an understanding that the renewal of the derogation was in part dependent on Europe's understanding that the derogation farms are exemplars for all Irish farming. And they introduce an awful lot of innovations first, have come in through the derogation, whether that's low emission slurry spreading, buffer zones, improved farm roadways, the storage of dirty water for longer periods during the winter with the prohibition on the spreading of dirty water. There's been a lot of things that farmers have done through the derogation first, and it's very important that everyone who avails of the derogation recognises the responsibility they carry with them.
Okay, well, we are going to have to leave it there. I'm not going to get around to the second topic this morning, but we'll hold that for some other week. I want to thank you, Pat, ever so much for joining us this morning, and may I wish you a very happy Christmas.
Thanks, Jim, and to yourself and your listeners.
That, listeners, was Pat O'Toole from the Irish Farmers Journal. Listeners, my next guest this morning, it's been some time since we've had a chat. She is Finola McCoy, and probably most of you know her best for CellCheck, but she received an award recently, and the award is Leadership in Herd Health, and we're going to talk a bit about that as well. Good morning, Finola, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invite, Jim. Good morning to you too.
Oh, it's good to have you back on. It's a long time ago.
I think it's been a while.
It is a while. It definitely is a while. Okay. I mentioned CellCheck first. You're 15 years now with CellCheck. If you look back on the 15 years, have cell counts come down considerably across Irish dairy farms?
Absolutely, Jim, they have, yeah. So CellCheck was first launched at the end of 2010, and over the following, I suppose, 7 or 8 years, the average bulk tank cell count nationally dropped by about 100,000 cells per mil. So back in the, around 2009, 2010, we were sitting at over 270,000 at a national average. And for the last 5 to 6 years, it's been consistently around 170 to 175. A little bit of variation within that, but broadly speaking, a phenomenal achievement. And I suppose the thing is, it hasn't been through anything kind of weird or wonderful or any silver bullet. It's really been about, I suppose, people having more of a focus on udder health, working better together, using the proven science, and just doing the basics really well. Now, obviously, there's always room for continued improvement, and we know with the kind of the increased focus on antimicrobial use and the need to reduce our antimicrobials on farm, that brings another challenge. But I really believe that we're much better placed to try and address those challenges now, when udder health is so much more stable and under better control.
Right, and it's probably going to be more important in the next year or so, because with milk prices dropping the way they are dropping, I just see this morning that Lakeland have dropped by 4 cents this month. So again, it's very important because, the amount of money a farmer gets is tied into one of the things it is tied into is cell count.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's well proven, and farmers themselves, once they've seen the change, I don't think they would ever go back, but it's well proven that animals that have a lower somatic cell count, because the udder is uninfected, they just produce more milk. They produce a greater quantity of milk. They actually produce to their full potential. The converse of that then is a cow that has an infected quarter, and we see her as a cow with a high cell count. She might look perfect on the outside, but she's not actually producing as much milk as she's capable of. So, when we're in a phase where everything is examined at a cost, we need to be really clear about what we put our efforts into. And if we can focus on improving the milk quality and the udder health, we get more milk. We have more milk to sell, albeit at a lower price, but we have greater volumes to sell. We're carrying fewer passengers. So a cow that's producing less milk is still going to eat more or less the same amount of food. She still costs the same to keep within the herd, but she's not paying her way as well as some of the others, the higher or the more profitable and efficient cows. And I think even beyond, milk price, always fluctuates and changes. But the other challenge that we have is this, the need for being increasingly efficient and for looking at our farm sustainability from an environmental aspect and from a social and even from a sort of a human or a mental health perspective. The ability to have a herd where disease is well prevented and well controlled is so much easier to manage. So just even in terms of the ease of management of those herds, things run a lot smoother. There's a lot less stress. And, I think we should never underestimate the stress associated with dealing with the disease situation within a herd for the farmer or for the workers and for the extended families, because it does go beyond kind of the farm gate into the home as well, the hassle and the stress of that, and the kind of the constant worry if things aren't running smoothly.
My observation and talking to dairy farmers, and particularly young dairy farmers, they don't tend to hold on to a cow that has an infected quarter. They're much more likely to move that cow onto the factory.
Yeah, I think certainly some of the kind of the approach is changing slowly over time. I think there probably was a time where we were perhaps whether it was that we were sentimental about individual cows or just the level of understanding of what was the likely outcome or cure rate, for example, for cows. I mean, we know for a fact that some cows, depending on the age, depending on what bacteria they're infected with or how long they've had an infection, some cows are just beyond treatment. We are not going to be able to cure them. No antibiotic is going to work. So I think we have to ask the hard questions. If it's not going to work, then what's our next step? And I think we probably resisted maybe asking those questions over the years. We've really tried to exhaust every possibility. But I think maybe we're kind of making those decisions. We're using better information. So more milk recording is certainly a really important aspect, and allowing people to make those informed decisions. It mightn't just be about whether she has a high cell count or not, but also looking at her production levels, her fertility, her overall health, lameness factors, the whole profile of health. Is she one of your better cows in the herd, or is she, as I call them sometimes, a passenger? So I think using that information and bringing the science with it. We know there's a lot of information that kind of can predict what the likely outcome for these cows is. So rather than keeping them there as a source of infection for other animals, let's make an informed, sensible management decision earlier.
Okay, so we're looking at the cow holistically rather than just at just one thing that may be wrong.
Absolutely. And, sometimes that's difficult to do. For example, I heard that, that may be locked down with TB, which is, also a challenge at the moment. They may have less capacity to make those decisions because, they might be short of cows and they may have to hold on to cows that they wouldn't otherwise choose to. So, it's not a perfect science. And it's, we have to manage it, with the other kind of factors that were, or the situation that you're in at the time.
Okay. Let's move on then to, and by the way, before we do move away from CellCheck, thank you ever so much for all the good work that you have done on behalf of Irish dairy farmers. You deserve their thanks as well as the thanks from everybody else. But moving on then to the award you got, Leadership in Herd Health. Tell us a little bit about that, Finola.
Yeah, well, it was a huge honour and an equally huge surprise, to be honest. It was awarded to me recently on the night of the CellCheck Milking for Quality Awards. And it was an award for leadership in herd health based on contribution to the industry, which, as I say, I was honoured and also, I suppose, very proud to be acknowledged. I think science is so important. It's the basis of everything that we do within Animal Health Ireland. We're an independent, science-based, not-for-profit organisation. It's always been a real privilege to work for a not-for-profit organisation because, I know with complete confidence that everything I'm doing is for the greater good. It's for the benefit of the industry, for farmers, for animal health and welfare. And it's been a huge honour to work with Animal Health Ireland. And I think, as I say, it was an honour really to be, for that science to be acknowledged as well, because sometimes the science isn't what people want to hear. It mightn't suit people's narrative or their agenda, or it might not fit with their focus. But I think it's really important that we refer to science because that's the evidence to back up our plans or our decisions or the direction that we go with an industry.
Of course, we're seeing the results of not following the science in the past. With the amount of damage we've been doing to soil by putting out too much fertilizers, the amount of damage we've done using certain sprays on, whether that's on grain or on grass or whatever the case may be. So, surely the time has come now that we will follow the science as far as Irish agriculture is concerned. Finola?
Yeah, I think it is really important, and I think it certainly is happening. I mean, we also have to remember that we learn more over time as well. The science and the evidence that we have now, we maybe didn't have 10, 20 years ago. Even when we look at antimicrobial use and dry cow therapy, for example. I mean, when I first started working as a veterinary practitioner, one of the key messages was to use antibiotic dry cow therapy in all cows at drying off because it's a good control strategy, and it is. But and that's what the science showed us at the time, that it was very effective at preventing infections. But now, a couple of decades later, the science is also showing us that from a societal and from a human health perspective, there are other consequences or other unintended effects of using more and more antimicrobials. So I think we have to be open to not so much the change in science, but learning more and new bodies, increasing bodies of evidence coming on board. I think we have to be open to consider them. And I suppose one thing that I feel is really important, and I like to see is that science being used when making policy. So for example, for the policymakers, to have that science available, so that that what they set in place as standards or policies are for the right reasons and are sound, if you like, and based on the science.
Okay, well, on that note, we will leave it for this morning. I want to thank you ever so much for joining us and sharing your time with CellCheck. And again, big congratulations on the award you received. It was well deserved. That, listeners, was Finola McCoy from CellCheck.
Thanks very much, Tim. It's a pleasure.
Before I sign off this morning, just to remind you that the big concert is on in Holy Cross tonight at 8 o'clock. So if you want something to do, why not drop into Holy Cross Abbey for the concert. That, listeners, is Ag Report for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll join me at the same time next week. Coming up next is the news at 10 o'clock, and after that, Eamon Dwyer presents Down Your Way.